Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Chair, I rise in strong opposition to this resolution, which is clearly just another attempt by Republicans to politicize their investigation, not a bipartisan investigation, their investigation into the United States withdrawal from Afghanistan. For what purpose? Solely to attack the Biden administration in an election year and deflect the scrutiny of their own partisan claims. You know, Mr. Chair, we had a committee markup yesterday, just yesterday. Why avoid regular order? Well, I'll tell you why. If this resolution had gone through committee, we would have been able to go line by line and address either their misleading or outright falsehoods that was made throughout the text. We could have made clear, for example, how Republicans cherry-picked testimony to reinforce their own predetermined, they made a determination before this was included, their own predetermined narrative about the Biden administration, while omitting any facts showing that former President Trump initiated the withdrawal, that President Trump's actions undercut U.S. leverage in negotiating with the Taliban, and that President Trump's order to withdraw more and more troops set it into an irreversible motion. But their investigation and this resolution, of course, is not concerned about the facts. What it's really concerned about is the politics. Why do I say that? Because the evidence that the Republicans released in their partisan misleading report, a report into which, I might say again, Democrats had no input and didn't even see until just hours before they made it public. So it was their secret. It is evidence by Republicans' rush yesterday to baselessly hold Secretary Blinken in contempt, even though the Secretary of State, who was with President Biden engaging in high-level diplomacy with world leaders at the UN yesterday, has stated time and time again, Secretary of State Blinken, that he's willing to testify. Why? What is the rush? What is the urgency? It's not to get answers. It's not to get the facts. The withdrawal was completed more than 3 years ago. Why? Because they wanted to make a spectacle before the November elections. It's clear. Nothing underscores their partisan theater more than Republicans, now get this, naming Vice President Harris over 200 times in their report, and we don't know when they just added, when they added it or not. I believe it was at the last second. And 5 times in the resolution, put that in there, despite the fact she's mentioned only 3 times in over 3,000 pages of transcript interviews. 3 times. And Vice President Harris was only mentioned twice in the Republicans' interim report in 2022. I wonder what changed. I wonder why all of a sudden they want to put her name more in it. Could it have something to do with the elections that are coming up in less than 45 days? This did not need to be a partisan exercise. No one has claimed on our side of the aisle that the withdrawal, or any party, that the withdrawal was perfect. There were clear lessons to be learned. The State Department even admitted it. The State Department did its own investigation. However, facts are facts, and witnesses consistently made it clear that the Biden administration developed a plan after the Trump administration failed to do so. Now, let me remind you that the former president initiated this withdrawal when he went from 14,000 troops upon taking office, when he took office, down to 2,500 troops by the end of his term. Multiple witnesses told us that the former president did not have a plan in place to evacuate our Afghan allies or our American citizens. But they don't want to talk about that. And witnesses also told us that the dynamic situation on the ground changed dramatically when Afghan President Ghani fled the country, leading to the collapse of the Afghan government and the military. And I would remind you, Ghani was here in Washington, D.C. in a meeting with leaders that I was there and the Republican leadership was there, where he had said that he and the Afghan government would stay and they would be there to monitor things. Just a week later, they fled. Witnesses in the GOP investigation repeatedly told us that while the situation in Kabul was chaotic, the administration's response was not. Our military and diplomats adapted quickly to facilitate the largest airlift in U.S. history to relocate over 120,000 people, and that's why President Biden said it was a success, and pulling out of Afghanistan was the right thing to do. So despite what my Republican colleagues say, our withdrawal did not begin the moment that President Biden took office, though planning for it did. It was the Trump administration's flawed deal with the Taliban that they don't want to talk about. It's called the Doha deal, that initiated our withdrawal, forced the Afghan government to release 5,000. Don't want to talk about this either. They forced the Afghan government to release 5,000 Taliban prisoners back into the battlefield and fundamentally change the power dynamic in Afghanistan. That's not in their report. They don't want to talk about that. Testimony reaffirmed that Trump's troop drawdowns were not conditions-based, but even erratically ordered a full withdrawal in his last days of office, a decision that the military leaders essentially overruled. They don't want to talk about that. Trump had also frozen the SIV program, leaving the Biden administration with a backlog of more than 17,000 cases to start addressing. And they did. But that's not in the report. They don't want to talk about that either. Republicans are trying desperately to clean up a candidate that truly has a flawed record, Trump's record, on this withdrawal. But President Trump himself has bragged that the Biden administration couldn't stop the process if they wanted to. And in this case, President Trump's rarity was accurate. Witnesses said that if the withdrawal was reversed, then the only condition in the Doha deal that the Taliban had honored to stop firing on U.S. troops would be broken, and we would be back at war, and we would have had to send more troops back into Afghanistan. So the president had two options upon taking office: end America's 20-year war in Afghanistan, or massively surge troops for an undeterminable amount of time. Yes, as President Biden has said, yes, he made the right decision not to send another generation of Americans to spill blood in Afghanistan. That was the right decision. Our country owes our gratitude, a deep debt of gratitude, to the 2,461 Americans who made the ultimate sacrifice in Afghanistan, including the 13 service members tragically killed in the ISIS-K attack at Abbey Gate. They deserved honest oversight of our longest war, which spanned 4 administrations. An honest oversight would look over all 4, as we thought on our side of the aisle was the appropriate thing to do if we really wanted to get the facts and make sure that we correct things that took place over that long 20-year time. But this resolution and report affirms that are not they're not oversight or accountability. It's really there are election season props used for political gain. Thankfully, the nonpartisan Afghan War Commission will provide that serious oversight that's necessary. And there is legislation that Congress can pass now to move forward, something impartial, something that will have real credibility, something that I believe could really console all of those that lost their lives for our great country in Afghanistan. We've reported bipartisan legislation by Rep. Titus to authorize the coordinator for Afghan relocation efforts. I know negotiations continue on legislation by Rep. Crow to improve how the State Department responds to crises, responsible legislation. The Afghan Adjustment Act and the Afghan Allies Protection Act, which are long-standing, bipartisan proposals, would keep the faith with the Afghans who fought and worked alongside us. We're going to do these kind of reports, should be bipartisan. So I deeply regret that one of the final bills we are likely to take up before election, I don't think it's by accident. We're getting out of here tomorrow. Last thing we're going to be doing is this. I know Republican leadership wanted to make sure of that. Politics. But even before we voted to keep our government open, this is what they want to do. It is instead, this is an unfounded partisan attack. We should be focused on at least have this vote, the CR, to keep this government open. The American people deserve better. Let's reject this resolution, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from New York.